Hello, this is Sean with Constant Ringing Tech, and here's another episode of setting up MikroTik in a small business environment or even home environment. I'm going to continue on from the last video, how we showed how the basic firewall works for MikroTik, and we're going to extend that a bit today. So let's go ahead and get started. Open Winbox, connect to the device. We're going to go IP firewall, and we already landed in the filter rules. And right now, what it's doing is it's allowing ICMP to come into the router. It's dropping everything that's not whitelisted. And for the forward chain, which is usually sending to other parts of the network, we say anything that's not within the destination net chain, I'm going to go ahead and it's not new to go ahead and drop that. Or anything that's new and not a part of that to drop that. But let's go ahead and talk about how this works. There's three chains. We have the input, which is anything coming in directly into the router itself. We have the forward chain, which means anything that comes in is coming into the router but is destined to go to another device, such as another router or another PC or other device on the network. And then you have the output chain, which is the direct opposite of input. Anything that's coming directly out of the router itself to go out to the next upstream router. It means when the router checks for DNS, when it tries to look for updates, if you ping out directly from the router, that all happens from the output chain. And with that said, it's controllable in a different fashion than the forward and input chains. So you could filter out checking for updates, or you could filter out ICMP, from the router if you wanted to do for whatever reason. But for now, let's go ahead and start with the input chain and see what we can do to improve this. So right now we have allow ICMP and drop everything that's not whitelisted. That's great, but what about related connections? Now, what happens when you open up and start making a voice over IP phone call? You have two connections that happen with the phone call: the session, or the basic connectivity to say, hey, these two devices are talking and just passing information back and forth. And then you have the audio portion. And that's actually a different connection, but it's related to the initial one. And this is where the next rule comes into place. So we're going to go to input. We're going to use all interfaces since it doesn't matter for this. And we're going to go to connection state. And typically in the firewall filters, things are and. However, for the connection state, they're or. So if it's established or related, then we can go ahead and we're going to allow that. So we have the accept. I'm going to go ahead and click on comment to add a comment. Allow related / established. And we're going to move this rule up above because it processes it from top to bottom. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for the forward chain. So I'm going to double click on this to open it up. I'm going to click on copy. Go to the general tab. Go to the forward chain. Hit apply. And basically, that rule has been duplicated for both the input chain and forward chain for related and established connections. And that's a great start. The next thing, just say you wanted to tighten up your firewall rules. You say, you know what? I don't care what's on the destination tab. I do not want to open up anything unless I explicitly open this up. And this is how MikroTik used to work a long time ago. We didn't have this extra connection NAT state at all. So I'm going to go ahead and disable that. Close it up. And now we're going to open up a port for an FTP server, port 21. So to do so, we're going to click on the plus sign. We're going to click on forward. We're going to choose protocol TCP, the destination port. And this is important. Use destination port. And we're going to do 21. And I highly recommend use the in interface or the WAN interface where it's coming into the device itself. I don't recommend making this blank. Things can break, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. So right now we have the 4-chain, TCP, port 21, the interface. Doesn't matter what kind of connection state it is. We're going to go ahead and to accept it. And I'll go ahead and bring this up above everything else. So basically right now we have allowed port 21 to be open to be used. The problem with that is we haven't forwarded it anywhere. So we've just punched a hole in the firewall, but we haven't told it to do anything. So let's go ahead and move over to the NAT tab. I have cleared off all the previous port forwards. So we're going to click on Add Destination NAT. Protocol is going to be TCP. Destination port is 21. Again, make sure you use the correct in interface. If you leave this blank, it's going to break, and I'll explain why right here. Right now on the Action tab, we're going to set this to Destination NAT, which is virtually port forward. You're going to pick a destination PC for or server for the FTP server. So let's say 1.55 and apply. So right now, anything that comes in that's destined for TCP port 21 coming through the Ether1 interface, which is the WAN, it'll be sent and directed to IP 1.55. Now, if you deselect the in interface, that means every connection that is connecting via port 21 gets redirected to 1.55. Why is that a problem? Well, if you're a person that likes to connect outbound to another FTP server out on the interwebs, your connection will get redirected to 1.55 and you'll never succeed. And that will cause you some headaches. So make sure you always choose an in interface when you're using your port forward. I also highly recommend you comment your port forwards. So we call it port forward FTP server. And there we go. We have now set up a port forward from scratch with explanation in less than 10 minutes. And to rinse and repeat that, you can just double click on the port forward, click on copy, and you can keep on extending, adding the different ports, or change the port, save it, and move on. You can also combine that into multiple ports in one firewall rule. So if you want to go here and go to Destination NAT and say you just want to add a whole bunch of ports. So you want to do 21 for FTP, you want to do 22 for SSH, you want to do port 80 for a web server, and port 8080 for a test server. Now if you just hit apply right here, this allows anything with 21, 22, port 80, or 8080 destined to go to those ports to be allowed through. Now it doesn't send them anywhere. This rule just says it's allowed through. And at that point you can then go to your NAT and make your appropriate firewall, your port forward rules to the different servers that you want to have that forward to. Well, that's it for this specific video about port forwards. But if you have any questions, reach out to me. I will do whatever I can to help you out. And until next time, thanks guys.